Greetings, cultivators from around the world. Jordan River here, back with more Growcast. Oishi desu. Today we have Madam Cannoli on the line. I'm so honored to speak with her about the upcoming Frenchy Dreams of Hashish documentary and so much more. This was a very insightful and in-depth and personal interview. I thank Madam for being so open and awesome. And I know you're going to love what we have to talk about, from hash to the cannabis culture to Frenchy and the film itself. So I know you're going to love this one. Before we jump into it with Madam, though, shout out to AC Infinity. ACinfinity.com. Code GROWCAST15 to get your savings and keep the lights on here at Growcast. We appreciate your support, and we love AC Infinity. They make the best grow tents around, extra thick poles. They've got nice, durable, thick siding. Now they have the new side ports. People have been asking for those, and AC Infinity, listen. Plus, they've got everything else you need to grow. They've got lights and pots and fans, and their oscillating fans, the Cloud Ray system. Check out their humidifiers, the Cloud Forge. How nice is your humidifier? Maybe it's time to replace that. The Cloud Rays are my favorite oscillators on the market. And of course, their Cloud Line series, what they got it all started with. All those years ago when we were partners with AC Infinity, all they made were those inline fans, and they're the best in the game. So shout out to the entire AC Infinity suite. They've got everything you need to get growing, from fans to tents to lights. Code GROWCAST15 works at ACinfinity.com. You support us and you're getting some badass durable grow gear while you're doing it. So thank you to all you listeners using code GROWCAST15, and thank you to AC Infinity. All right, let's get into it with Madam Cannoli. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to Growcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in again today. Before we get started, as always, I urge you to share this show, turn someone on to growing, tell a grower about Growcast, spread the show. It's how we grow, everybody. And of course, see everything we are doing at growcastpodcast.com/action. There you'll find all the action, the seeds, the membership, the classes. Whatever we're doing, you'll find it there. Today, I have a very esteemed guest that I am honored to have on the line. I know there is an incredible documentary that's about to drop that a lot of you have been excited about, and I cannot wait to talk about this today. Many of you know and love Frenchy Cannoli, who made a huge impact on this show and on me personally, one of my favorite figures in the cannabis industry of all time. And I'm very, very proud to have on the show today Madam Cannoli with us right now. How is it going, Madam? How are you doing? Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Like I said, I see Frenchy as one of these people that people really look up to, right? And he was so full of passion, and he made such an impact everywhere he went. So I want to thank you. I know that a lot of his attributed success, he talked about, of course, the great Madam Cannoli. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for all you've done. I want to thank you for coming on the show today, and thank you for creating this amazing documentary that's about to drop. So thank you, Madam Cannoli.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you again for having me. But Frenchy used to say that people made too much of him, that he owed so much to the farmers that he worked with, both those people that originally shared their traditions with him in producing countries, and then these last few years in what he called the third chapter of his life, to the farmers of the Emerald Triangle, the outdoor organic regenerative farmers who have been fighting the good fight for multiple generations in California to protect the plant and to legalize it and normalize it, more importantly, because that was another area that Frenchy had a lot of passion around, because he had really experienced so profoundly the stigma of being a cannabis consumer. He used to say in France, there was this idea that if you consumed cannabis, that you were going to bring this great shame to your family and end up kind of penniless and, in a terrible condition in the street. And that in his experience, it couldn't be farther from the truth. He said, I have a quote in the book that basically he said, cannabis consumers are the creatives in the population, and they're the future of humanity, and that we just haven't been acknowledged correctly yet.
That is really, really well said. And you're absolutely right. I think that one of the reasons that people looked up to Frenchy so much is because he was truly humble. and he passed, credit along. So many people are just in this industry to grow this plant like a commodity and to make some quick money and get that green rush money. And Frenchy couldn't have been further away from that, which leads into the artist angle. Like, I do see him as an artist of hashish. And I guess that's, this documentary, Frenchy Dreams of Hashish. This is a perfect example of that correlation, which was he was in it for the art. He, you know what I mean? That's what it felt like to me. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Oh, absolutely. Frenchy was always about the quality of it. And I think all artists to a degree are chasing quality, whether that be the perfection of the expression in the painting or music or dance, or in his case, really understanding what he called the science behind the process, feeling that by truly understanding the science of what you were working with, that would allow you to have better control, to better manipulate the outcome. And if you're, an artist as a hash maker, that gives you so much kind of power to create products that are designed for different parts of the population. It's not a one-size-fits-all scenario. And he was very, very interested as we were having more and more science about what the individual cannabinoids do in terms of both the therapeutic and the psychological impact to humans, along with the terpenes, that a true artist would be able to manipulate those in a way that served the population.
Wow.
Like you said, above and beyond just somebody growing, whatever flavor of the month strain and, batch processing it with little love or care, really focusing on spending the minimum amount of manpower to make the maximum amount of profit, which is what we've seen in both California and Canada as the downfall of the industry.
Right.
We had these big money people come in with no background in cannabis. Most of them have never smoked and continue to acknowledge that. I mean, when you look at it, one of the largest cannabis companies in the world is owned by a couple of Mormons who are not consumers. And somehow they think they're going to teach us to do it better. Frenchy had a famous line where he was like, the reason that all those big companies in Canada have lost so much money is none of them employed a dope dealer to sell their dope.
So true. That is so true. And of course, that's what's going to happen is the patients are going to suffer from that. But I do see that. And I do see Frenchy as an artist. He tapped into that artistic, creative side of cannabis so well. It really exemplifies that. Before we get into, I mean, we're already riffing. I love this, but this does bring together, this does bring a question to mind before we get into all the questions that we have prepared. Was Frenchy a fan of other types of art? Was he an art lover or a music lover or a film lover? What other types of art did he engage in?
He was a watercolor painter. When he was younger, he also was a designer. He had a line of handbags that he had manufactured in
No way.
Thailand. They were sold in Japan. He was an antiques dealer at one point. He loved anything historic and detailed that celebrated somebody else's passion.
Wow.
I spent about off and on 20 years in Japan. I went to university there and I worked there. So he used to come and visit me and stay with me for a few months, when he was kind of wandering the world doing all of his stuff. And he just loved that Japanese tradition around apprenticeship and how you could take simple crafts and turn that into art. There's this understanding in Japan that if you practice a craft long enough, you become a national living treasure of that history,
right,
of that technique, and it's not the 10,000 hours that they talk about in the West. It's the 30 years that the Japanese, so it's just that whole thing of, I think cultures that have long history have more of an understanding of the patience that it takes to really perfect something like that. As Americans, I think the good part of us in our usefulness is that we're very inventive and creative and inquisitive. The downside of that is we don't quite have the patience to perfect. So you look at things like Well, we've been good at like, we'll invent an idea, but then somebody like the Japanese will take it and perfect it and really fine tune it and do it to a better degree than what we could have done.
That is so funny. The 100-year deal. We're like, yeah, sure, 100-year deal, absolutely. You're right. It's a different approach, and I love that. I can't believe Sugoi. I can't believe you're so involved in Japanese culture. That is so cool. How long did you spend over there? Did you say?
About 20 years.
What? Oh, I think that, yeah, this had come up. This had come up before. I didn't know it was 20 years. Oh my goodness. That is so cool. So there's a real connection there. For, this documentary, Frenchy Dreams of Hashish. That makes sense. It's all coming together now.
Well, and that was kind of a riff when Frenchy had, in 2013, Subcool gave him a dedicated page on his Roll It Up forum, because I think Sub's feeling was so many people are asking him questions in other parts of the forum that it was almost like it's taking up too much space. Almost like when you would go to see Frenchy at the Emerald Cup, you never wanted your booth to be next to his booth because it's just like the spillover would be insane.
That's wild.
Sub gave him his dedicated page. And so Frenchy was kind of fine-tuned his teaching methodology through answering those questions for a couple of years. And then in 2015, there was an opportunity. He had been writing for Weed World magazine in the UK for a couple of years at that point, I think. And Weed World wanted him to do a smoke report. And he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to get bogged down in that. He was really focused on perfecting his understanding of the science behind. And he had met the Dank Duchess a little bit before that. So he approached her and said, because Frenchy was always about wanting to promote more women in the industry, would you like to take on this smoke report? But if you want to do that, you need to learn to make hashish, because in order to evaluate hashish to a good degree, you need to understand how it's made. So he taught the Duchess. And then very shortly after that, almost simultaneously, I remember he came home and he's like, I'm going to start teaching two people, the Duchess and his apprentice, Belle. And it feels like it was within weeks of each other. And Belle was very young at that time. I'll always remember she wasn't old enough to rent a car, because one time I wanted her and Frenchy to go somewhere and she couldn't rent the damn car. But so she came and lived with us for 7 years in a very traditional Japanese format, like a formal apprenticeship where you live and you work with the person who's teaching you, because she had also been in Japan. She was a military brat. And so at one point, her father had been stationed in Japan during the same time we were there, but we didn't know each other because, the age difference and everything. But that kind of led to then more and more people through the Roll It Up and other kind of environment asking Frenchy, originally meeting him in cannabis events and saying, what do you do? And Frenchy would be like, I'm hashishin. And they would be like, what? What's a hashishin? Because, the war on drugs by the US government had been so successful. The feds had put all of the big smugglers, the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, the people who were, kind of controlling that pipeline of traditional hashish into the US, they had busted all those people. So we had a couple generations of people who had no exposure to traditional concentrates in the US. You were just getting either the weed that was being grown in the hills of the Emerald Triangle or stuff coming overland from Mexico.
Right.
So Frenchy kind of took it on himself, almost like his little mission was going to re-educate everybody on traditional hashish. And so he started going to all these events, and for him, the best way to do that was, he called it, I'm going to smoke them out. So he would just share hashish with all the young people, and people really enjoyed it. And so then they started naturally saying, okay, where can I get this? And he was, it was limited what he could do in terms of, providing to people, because it was the whole script situation with patients in California at that time. So he decided to start teaching and started going all over the US. We went to Europe a number of times, Canada. And at one point, he came home after a trip up north where he had went to visit his farmers. And he was so excited. He said, I spent part of the time driving from the Bay Area to Humboldt talking to a guy from Lebanon. And I was like, from Lebanon? What were you guys talking about? And he said, well, this young man approached me. His family had been in the hash making business at one point, but due to the war and other constraints, the tradition had been broken. And this young person wanted to, was trying to revive, but he was missing some details. So he spent about an hour of the drive talking this Lebanese person through the details of what he needed to do to make traditional hashish again. And he was so inspired by it, this ability to give back and to kind of return what had been given to him. He said he wanted to do a series of hash making videos because people had been saying to him, people who were in countries or for whatever reason were not able to come to a workshop, that they needed the knowledge too. So he wanted to have his workshop filmed and that we would make this available for free online so that everybody anywhere who could get access to our website could have this information. So that led to my daughter was in performing arts in New York. So I reached out to her. I was like, hey, do you know anybody doing like video filming that, could do this video of Daddy's workshop that we're trying to put together? And she introduced us to Jake Remington. She had just been in as a dancer in a video that he had done for some rap musician or something. And it was a couple weeks before cannabis. So we told Jake, okay, meet us in Barcelona. So we'll see if we vibe, if we're going to do this thing together. So talk about baptism by fire for Jake, because Barcelona before cannabis is just like this insane schedule of going to these cups and going to the social clubs in the evening and the cannabis during the day. And that year there was some special soccer game that occurred in the city that like was historic on top of it.
Oh, man.
So they had a great time together. So Jake came out to California and, already we did a workshop in Barcelona. So he filmed that one. We did a couple that he filmed. And then he came out to California so that he could have more footage just with Frenchy. And as they were doing all that, I kept thinking of Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And at one point in the movie Jiro Dreams of Sushi, there's a scene where they're talking to his son, who's, kind of like his apprentice. And at this point, the son is in his 60s because Jiro is in his 80s when they're doing this film. Mm-hmm. And the son is in the hallway. They have their sushi restaurant is in the underground of the Ginza train station. And he's in the hallway with a little burner and he's toasting the sheets of seaweed paper, the nori, and he's just moving his wrist back and forth while he talks about this idea that, anybody can learn the technique, that's just a question of time. But what really makes somebody an artist, what really makes somebody great is not only the discipline to put in the time, but it's the talent. And that talent's really the elusive piece. And that, it's not something that is calculated. Some people have it or some people don't. And that talent is in a way also manifested, I think, for those of us who are observers of it, as passion. And that's exciting. There's something for humans to observe passion that kind of kindles something in you as well. And I think for a lot of us, it's like, oh, I don't have that talent, but I could have a passion for what you produce. And that in that way, I kind of vicariously participate in your talent.
Absolutely.
So for people who are like winemakers or hash makers, we're lucky because we get to physically sample those things and kind of then go, oh, I get it. I get why we're excited about what you do as comparison to the person who's making the mids and who is just running it through, machinery to produce a product. But we all go, hey, okay, so you produce that thing, but I'm not going to pay, big bucks for that. And I think it's that thing that we're all trying to come back to, especially after the pandemic, where the value of a human life is about experience. It's about connection. It's about exchanging meaningful things together. And that's why, like, having a great meal slowly is so, important.
Yes.
Or, going on little trips together where you just have quiet moments, or maybe share something really meaningful to you. And that's enhanced by smoking, and you look at traditional cultures and they had ceremonies around that. When we look at the
Mm-hmm.
Hindu culture and the sadhus who smoke, and that each time you light the shilom, you make a benediction to the gods and you bless the people that you're sharing that with. Or traditional indigenous culture of the people that were here in the native lands of the Americas. They had a lot of tradition around smoking together and bringing conflicting sides together to smoke and to explore conversations or explore challenges. And they would all kind of lock themselves into rooms, so to speak, with the smoke, and it could go on for weeks and sometimes months when they were dealing with a difficult issue.
It's a thread throughout humanity. That's a really incredible perspective. And you're right. Like I've given a lot of thought to like happiness, right? And the meaning of life and all these things that go deeper than just being happy, like satisfaction and providing value and contributing to those around you and having a connection with nature, like you're saying. But when you really boil it,
beauty.
Yeah, when you really boil it down though, I think that at its extreme core is exactly what you just said, which is fine food and fine smoke and sometimes a little fine drink among friends and loved ones. Like that is the meaning of life. And I think you're right. That idea that we can all enjoy what the artist has talentfully crafted, you know what I mean? Talentfully crafted
It connects
through
us.
their passion. Yes. And it creates that value.
Yeah.
It connects us together.
Yeah.
It creates a value to our culture and our spiritual well-being. And I know it's getting pretty meta, but at the end of the day, like those moments, like you said, eating slowly, laughing with friends and family, that's the meaning of life. That's what we all loved about Frenchy, was his laugh.
That proverbial thing of like, okay, you could have, I don't know, a bunch of fancy cars or a bunch of fancy clothes. And I don't know, when I think about the most beautiful moments of my life, Frenchy and I were pretty poor.
Yeah.
And we had each other, and we were on a beach where there was nobody else for 6 months.
That is so cool. Best things in life are free.
Yeah.
It's totally something that I agree with, and you have to kind of live your life by. I love that though. And Frenchy just embodied that spirit. So cool. This is crazy though. The Japanese connection and that documentary Jiro was so good. So that's cool that it inspired you so much. And yeah, I just want to hear more. I don't want to cut you off. Tell me more about the production process of this movie and what we can expect from it, right? Like I know you're going to show, it's going to be a celebration of his life, I'm sure, and showing his craft and things like that. But is there like an overarching message that you want to convey or something like that?
Well, I'm not going to, I won't do any spoilers, but
yeah, can't spoil. True.
Quintessential Frenchy in that, he was an activist for the plant. He loved the plant. He loved the community. And he really, really loved the farmers who have been fighting the good fight all these years in Northern California, and the San Francisco gay community that led the fight to legalization that we owe so much to. And he was very acknowledging of these elements. He always used to say, that I don't make this quality is given to me by people who really care about the planet, care about the plant, care about the interaction of humanity with this, environment. So the film celebrates all these things.
Wow.
And we're using the film as a vehicle to help support something that was near and dear to Frenchy's heart. Some of the farmers featured in the film have created a nonprofit called the Lost Coast Farmers Guild. And they're working also with another nonprofit called the Origins Council. And the Origins Council helps do lobbying for over 900 legacy farms and businesses in California.
Whoa.
And the project that the Lost Coast Farmers Guild is doing is specific to studying cannabis terroir. This was something that Frenchy felt was really important for the farmers up there to gain control of, is this legacy, this heritage around the fact that some of the best cannabis in the world is grown in Northern California. And this is an acknowledgement that existed before legalization and that we should look to the Bordeaux Chamber of Commerce at the turn of the century in France when they sought to establish legal protection for the farmers of their region, because they felt that the wine that was grown there had a recognition for being among the best, if not the best in the world. And they were going to use that as a benchmark to start judging quality in other products.
Right. I remember talking to Frenchy about that, and it's exactly right. I would love to get involved however I can in supporting those organizations. Limited time FOOP sale just for the Growcast audience. Code Growcast now gets you 25% off through the end of the month. Hit up thefoop.com, grab your clone gels, grab your FOOP mist just in time for spring and clone season and seed poppin' season. Start off right with the certified organic liquid nutrients, clone gel, FOOP mist, and more. Thefoop.com. Now, usually code Growcast gets you 15% off, but up until April 1st, you're going to get 25% off. Now, that's a special sale just for the Growcast universe. Code Growcast boosted till the end of the month. And FOOP ain't going to be running more sales like this. I was on the phone with Larry. He said this is a one-of-a-kind exclusive Growcast sale. The code has been boosted until April 1st, and then they're going to hunker down and get ready for this big spring season. It is that time of year, everybody. We're popping seeds. We're getting our cuttings ready. We're ready to plant them outdoors soon. So make sure to start off right with the microbiologically enriched, fish waste-based nutrient line. Thefoop.com, code Growcast for 25% just till the end of this month, just for the Growcast audience. Thank you to the Foop. I'm about to hit my garden right now and water in some Bloom 1 and 2 and some of that awesome sweetener, baby. Get ready for spring. Everything you need, all organic. Thefoop.com, code Growcast for 25% off. What can you tell us? What can you tell us about Frenchy's like what he was working on in this area of terroir? When you say it, it's so much more. It sounds so much more beautiful. But like, I would love to know more about what you heard him talking about when it came to this. Like, obviously, this idea of your environment playing into your product, it makes sense, right? You grow something in one place, tastes different than when you grow it somewhere else. Did he attribute that to primarily microbiology? Did he attribute that to, what were his general philosophy?
So Frenchy's French. So the traditional way of approaching this in France is very multifaceted. They look at 7 different sciences, and I don't know all 7 off the top of my head, but basically, yes, the soil microbiome is one aspect. So that's not only the microbes that are in there, but the minerals, kind of what's been created by the plants surrounding that area. But this concept of terroir is also looking at the atmospheric conditions. So when we look at Northern California, while we don't have huge rainfall all year long, there's a very lush forest up there that's fed by activity of fog that comes off the Pacific Ocean that's very cold. And so, we just get this fog that rolls. Anybody who lives in NorCal, you understand just the fog rolling in every
right
afternoon.
Off of the bay, right before you get into Eureka on the 101. That huge wave of fog. The fog plays into it? That's crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's part of the whole taste of Humboldt. And also that area has rich mineral deposit, very clean water, in part because of all the vegetation they have up there. So in the French traditional concept, all of these things, and including, very importantly, the soul of the farmer who is kind of hosting or nurturing, if you will, that environment is very, very important. And that's so cool. Almost like the emotional maturity, the psychological attitude of the person in their dealing, how they approach to growing the plants, the types of inputs that they use in their environment obviously have an impact on the end product, but have an impact on the overall microbial life of what's going on there. So I think as the farmers have, most of those people started out as kind of back to the land hippies and didn't know what they didn't know, but over the years have studied so much about how to be good stewards of the land, how to practice regenerative agriculture, and have really had a huge influence on other areas of people doing more traditional agriculture, not growing just cannabis, but growing other things, have been very much involved in that movement. So all of this knowledge has accumulated into the amazing products that they grow today.
Wow.
And the award-winning, cannabis that produces over and over and over.
It was so cool how he was so passionate about that region.
Very
And
much
I
so.
know it's just gotten harder and harder. I left Humboldt in 2015. I lived there for 5 years, and it was rough at that time. And I've only heard,
Yeah.
have people been reaching out to you? I bet people have been reaching out to you, probably a combination of grateful that you're doing this and you're highlighting this, right? And then also probably pretty woeful that they're dealing with like rolling brownouts of the power, right? And it's just hard to be up there.
Yeah. Very, I mean, I both Humboldt and Mendo, I think actually Mendo, when it comes to the permitting, is in a much worse place than Humboldt. But yeah, no, it's very troubling how the whole legalization was rolled out, the adult use was rolled out
Yes.
in California, and just some of the, I guess they don't refer to them as promises, but there were things that were said that were supposed to protect the farmers for 5 years, to give them an opportunity to establish and stabilize, that weren't quite honored, that created a lot of the situation that we have now.
Sure.
I just hope, in part, I mean, while the film is a celebration of the farmer, it's also a cautionary tale. So I hope that, some of the legalization that's going on in other states that are a little bit behind us, that they step back and they look at these things a little bit and have some thought to their local communities, because a bunch of big money coming in to establish the industry has not proven to be a good thing by any
Yes.
means. I mean, again, just look to Canada and California, two epic failures in the rollout of what should have been. I mean, especially in the case of California, we had so many people who were really experts at what they were doing in terms of their legacy business. And it's just criminal that, some of that expertise wasn't leveraged to the greater success of the existing community.
That's really, really well put. And I feel like some states seem to be changing it up and learning a little bit, whereas other ones are just modeling themselves after that progression, right?
I think that the problem is that some of the same bad players that have failed in Canada and California,
Yes.
They're just being allowed to go and,
do the same shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just do the same fucking thing. And now it's in Massachusetts, and in a few years it'll be ruined there too. Yeah, it's incredible what you're doing. It's very important work. Honestly, I mean that. So let me just give out the URL. Jeez, it is FrenchyDreamsOfHashish.com for the film, and then of course FrenchyCannoli.com for all the resources and the DIY stuff. And you got the hash making course in 6 different languages up there. Really love your message.
Yeah, so that was a beautiful thing that happened after Frenchy's passing. I was approached by a group who their day jobs are working in cinema in Brazil, but they're also big hash aficionados. And so they said to me that they had, they themselves, who were had good English skills, had learned so much from the films, but they knew that there were a lot of people in Brazil who loved hashish who didn't have very good English skills. And so could they do the subtitles in Portuguese for the do-it-yourself videos? And I said, oh, that'd be amazing. And they offered to do it as a volunteer effort.
Wow.
To support our open source project here.
That's amazing.
And so when they did that, we have a group on Facebook where we support education around hash making. And so I posted it there and I was like, hey, everybody, Overgrow Shop in Brazil has made subtitles available in Portuguese. Well, then somebody came up and they're like, oh, I'll do Spanish. And then somebody was like, well, if we have Spanish and Portuguese, we have to have French. And of course, the Italians were like, well, if there's French, then we have to have Italian. And then some nice person from Germany also did it. So we ended up with the subtitles in 6 languages for the do-it-yourself videos. And right now we have them in 5 languages from all the same amazing people for the film. And currently somebody is translating the Danish, which I just think is fabulous.
Hell yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
It's international. It's an international effort. That is absolutely incredible.
It has been very much so. Yeah. So so we're going to do the worldwide online premiere April 29th, and we're kind of making a big celebration out of it virtually. People will be able to choose from probably 6 languages with the Danish. So we'll have English because Frenchy needs subtitles in English. And then we'll have Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, and if all goes well, the Danish. So that gives people, a lot of options to really feel comfortable with watching the film. And then we are planning to have 3 different sessions, online live streams. Some people are going to be holding in-person events. A lot of people are going to be doing, like little group viewings at home. But we're going to hook up with some of the people in the social clubs and whatnot in Europe first, 8:30 p.m. there. And we're going to do a live stream and talk to them for a little bit. And then a few hours later, we'll go and we'll do another one at 8:30 p.m. for all of the East Coast of the Americas. So including Canada, US, Mexico, Brazil, talked with people who are holding, public celebrations of the video together, and just meet with some of the farmers, meet with the filmmaker, and explore the film details a little bit. And then finally, we'll do the same thing on the West Coast. And we've got some friends in Canada who are going to be doing a little something. We've got a group in Humboldt and another one in Mendo that are going to be having in-person events. And then Green Street in Los Angeles is also going to be doing an in-person situation.
Oh, it's awesome.
So I'm looking forward to, kind of spending the 29th celebrating the film and having a bunch of people watch it, helping me make a bunch of noise over it. Because one of the big things about the film for me is emphasizing that not only people in the cannabis community should see it, other people should see it so that we can really get over the stigma. It's so frustrating how much stigma still exists around cannabis use. But when we look at, some of the dangers of consuming alcohol, for example, I think adults should be able to consume alcohol. I don't think they should drive when they're drunk and, have car accidents because of it. But we don't see that same kind of social stigma around.
Exactly. It's the hypocrisy.
Well, and just the whole thing, like, you can have bars and consume together. What is the big deal about consumption lounges? Why can't the US maybe look to the Barcelona model of having these consumption spaces that are not visible to the outside world? When you go to Barcelona, none of the consumption spaces are in buildings that have windows at the level of where there's consumption spaces are. They're all in windows that are in buildings that have almost like a double facade. You go in and there's an antechamber before you're actually in the space where the consumption lounge is, or they're in a basement. So as you're walking along the streets, you have no idea that there are normal adults doing adult things in the privacy of this space, not bothering anybody with family, with children, who are not of an age to be exposed to these adult activities, even more than you would bring children into a bar.
Exactly. Or a game of poker or whatever it may be. It's the hypocrisy that drives people mad, right? It's exactly what you're saying, which is, okay, we can't legalize cannabis because it has no medicinal value. It doesn't have it. Well, what about cigarettes? Those are legal.
Well, and we do have the science now, thanks to so much work that's been going on for some time now, that actually, yes, it does have medicinal and therapeutic value,
Well, of course. No, well, hold on. They're hypocritical about that too, which is they say, there's no medicinal value, but we're going to patent Epidiolex, which is a CBD derivative seizure medicate. They want it both ways in every single case. Like you said, they say it's dangerous. Well, what about alcohol? Alcohol is dangerous. Well, it's bad for society. Well, what about gambling? Gambling is, you can say that the moral degeneracy argument could be applied to. There's no argument that they make that they're not double-handedly applying it in a different way somewhere else. You know what I mean? It's a total bait and switch, and it's a complete hypocrisy.
I just wish that more of the science around the endocannabinoid system that exists in all mammals would be acknowledged,
Yes.
because then if you start to do that, Frenchy used to say, he didn't believe in God, but when you think that, so humans, we have like this kind of common single cell origin between plants and ultimately, mammals,
Mhm.
but that the plants came before us like 26 million years.
Sure.
And so here we are. We have this plant that evolved 26 million years before us. And somehow we have a system in our body that is like a lock and key mechanism with this plant that was, evolved so much longer before us. He used to say, I don't believe in God, but I definitely believe in some kind of divine intelligence. And when I understand this connection between the plants and humans that is at a cellular level, he's like, that takes hash making to a whole new level.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about the passion of the flavor and the connoisseur aspect and all of that as its own kind of conversation. But I love that medicinal pursuit. I know Frenchy was very passionate, like you said,
He
and
said
learning more
all
about that.
cannabis use is therapeutic.
Yes.
Whether you are aware of it, whether you kind of consciously acknowledge it or not, all cannabis use is therapeutic.
That is so true. Have had that same sentiment recently, which is I have an extraordinarily hard time distinguishing recreational cannabis use from medicinal cannabis use. That line doesn't exist. You know what I mean? You speak to anyone, even people who claim they use it recreationally, and they say, "Well, I use it to relax at the end of the day." It's like that's medicinal use, or even better, what you just quoted Frenchy as saying is therapeutic. That's a perfect way to put it, actually.
Yeah, he used to make a clear distinction. He's like, leave the medicine to the pharmacists and the doctors. No problem with that. They should control that. They should develop the drugs to treat the illnesses. But therapeutic use, that's like aromatherapy. That's like your,
So
grandmother
true.
giving you chamomile tea when you had an upset stomach, traditionally, when he was a little boy.
Totally. Some bone broth, some real, like, it is a plant medicine at the end of the day.
Yes.
But I love that term, the therapeutic aspect of it, because that's what it is. It's homeopathic, it's therapeutic, it's all of those things.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I do want to speak about hashish specifically, though, because this traditional temple ball method that Frenchy was such a master of and such a proponent of, I feel like it's going to come back in a huge way. I really, really do. Like, it's always been this niche aspect of cannabis. I'm sure you would agree with that. And it's certainly been growing because of the efforts of people like you. But I have a feeling that it's going to pop off in like mainstream culture. And because things are progressing that way, right? Everyone going from BHO to rosin and solventless. Do you feel that there's like a kind of trendy explosion that's waiting to happen around temple balls, like coming to the forefront?
So the thing for us, grouping myself with the Europeans now, is that we always only saw the resin. So this kind of phenomena of looking at the plant and seeing the flower, this is a very North American thing.
Yes.
And I think this really dates to, the success of the Fed's war on drugs, is that to a degree, because North America is almost like a big island to a degree from some of the rest of the world.
Sure.
When we look at cannabis tradition in Europe, this is something that could travel overland, from its birthplace, now that we understand is probably in northern Tibet 28 million years ago, and then through animal migration, through humans looking to the plant and touching it and realizing it was a source of food and fiber and nutrition, and then taking that with them as they traveled the Silk Road into the Mediterranean, more recently with Napoleon's army enjoying hashish smoking in Egypt and bringing the tradition back to them, like good military always do all over
Right.
the world. They bring home the drugs with them, good or bad. I'm just thinking of the poor guys in Vietnam that brought heroin back with them, but that's a less illustrious story. So in Europe, there was always the tradition of seeing the concentrate, not seeing the flower. The smoking of the flower is a pretty new, I would say, last 15-year phenomena in Europe. And so this tradition of Frenchy really used to say that for him, hash smoking, not rosin. And I think it's important to kind of clarify definitions, because in North America also there's this tendency to use the term hash almost as if we were talking about dairy products, that everything made as a cannabis concentrate.
So true. Yes. That's how we say, like, and you're right, that comes from a land of prohibition. Like that, I grew up in the Midwest where it was illegal, and it's hash is the overarching term, like dairy. You're right. And then you got your cheese and your milk and your cottage cheese, and you got your bubble
and your
hash
ice cream and your yogurt, right? Yeah. No, and I keep having this. I've had some kind of really ugly confrontations with who have told me basically, back off, old lady. This is our culture and we'll call it whatever we want.
Oh boy.
And part of me is like, okay, you can do that, but the rest of the world is not going to understand you. And Frenchy used to say, this is kind of like the American tradition of football. Here you took this term and you kind of appropriated it from another game, i.e. soccer. And he used to say, and the funny thing is, your game, you hardly touch the ball with your foot. So
maybe a couple of times a game. Yeah. With the punt and with the field goal, you touch it with your foot. Otherwise, football is not, you do not want to touch it with your feet.
Not an effort to create conflict. It's an effort to create clarity, because, language is limitless. We can create as many nouns as we want. So I don't understand why we're kind of insisting on using this one term to cover traditional hashish, to cover loose resin, to cover rosin, to cover trim bin, refuse.
Yeah, refuse. Oh,
and keep is another word. Don't even get me going, because that one has a precedent that goes back 200 years in North Africa, where keef is actually chopped black tobacco mixed with chopped cannabis flower, smoked in a long, thin pipe known as a sebsi in Morocco.
Oh, is that true? I didn't know it involved tobacco. See,
black tobacco.
I had never heard that before. Yeah, and then where I grew up, a spliff was either half tobacco, half weed, or it was just a term for a joint of cannabis, just cannabis. So it was very confusing.
So, all of these things, I think this kind of misuse of language has, and of course, people are going to do whatever they're going to do with their local slang and whatnot. That's fine. But at some point, if you want to do commerce, even like, let's say they opened up interstate commerce. And if we, when you're talking about hash in the Midwest, it's this smorgasbord of products. But if we're talking about it, from Frenchy's perspective in California, it's this very specific loose resin trichome heads that have been gathered either through a dry sift or an ice water sieving process, and then pressed into a mass with a source of heat. And all of the material from those trichome heads remain together in that mass. And that resulting mass is traditional hashish. Mm-hmm. Whereas then if you take that mass and you use a much greater pressure using a rosin press to extract, to press the resin, the pure resin from those trichome heads, that the cellular membrane. And so the cellular membrane is left behind. That resulting product is rosin. And I don't understand why there's such a resistance to using that term for that product. I've had a number of people say, no, that's hashish. And I'm like, well, but how can this previous product that you acknowledge is a product, how can it be the same thing? That would almost be like if I told you, here, I have some applesauce and I have some apple juice, and you're continuing to call the apple juice applesauce. Why would you do that?
Well, so a couple of things. First of all, those just sound like people online going to fucking argue. There's probably just some trolls out there. But the second thing I'll say is people who genuinely don't know, it's because of the dispensaries. And I've experienced this before, which is the MSO fucking cultivators, the ones who don't know what they're doing and aren't from the craft world, they create concentrates that come out vastly different consistencies. So they start making up names for these things, whether it's wax or butter or sauce or diamonds in sauce or whatever. So they create such a smorgasbord because where's the regulatory body to say, oh no, wine, there's a definition for wine. I'm sure there is some alcohol fucking board of regulation that defines what you can and can't call wine. That doesn't exist because of illegalization. So it's just wild.
You know, when you look at this terminology, it comes from published pharmacy texts that, you know, most countries have. And so when you compare some of these lexicons from one country to the other, there's even a great deal of difference in how this has been approached historically. So it's not going to be an easy thing to clean up by any means,
right?
Because you have the history, you have the culture, you have the science that, you know, to a large degree has been made up by a bunch of people who don't know what really truly what they're dealing with. You can see this. There was a big study done by the English around the turn of the century in India, and they went out and they surveyed. They were wanting to determine, does cannabis consumption cause insanity? Because if it caused insanity, they were going to make it illegal because they wanted to be able to, you know, control the population. They wanted a peaceful society, right? But if it didn't cause insanity, then they wanted to be able to process it in such a manner that it was easy to calculate taxes on it. Because if a bunch of people were consuming this, well, they wanted to have a piece of the pie in terms of the profits.
Right.
And so they interviewed all these pharmacists, all these traditional cannabis growers in India, hash makers. There's a big tradition there of edible type consumption in the drink called bhang and in some other edible products. So they have recipes of this. And the final, you know, outcome of this, I think the research took like 4 or 5 years, and there's 7 volumes. It's open source, it's online, but it's a wealth of information about, no, it does not cause insanity. And here are traditional recipes, and here's how it's involved in the traditional culture and has been around forever, and they haven't had any problem with it.
Wow. Yeah, it's just we see these patterns throughout human history. And sometimes we take a step back and sometimes we take a step forward. Alcohol being illegalized, coffee was illegalized throughout history in several different nations. And eventually people are like, no, I really fucking like this thing. You don't understand. This is a plant medicine. It's extremely healthy. And I like this thing, whether it's coffee or cannabis.
Well, but you know, it always came down to a financial motivation on the part of the government. Because when you look at the legalization of coffee or tea, there's, you know, the taxes associated with that were huge. I mean, look at, you know, some of the challenges between the U.S. and England in terms
good call.
of, you know,
the Boston Tea Party.
Separating. It was all about tea taxes.
That's right. You absolutely nailed it. Can we get this money? Or can we use it to like oppress people and use it as a kind of sledgehammer? So yeah, it's crazy. I really like the philosophy that you and Frenchy have carried. I can't say it enough. Well, wait a second though. Before we move on from this, did Frenchy drink coffee? Was he a tea drinker or a coffee drinker?
My God,
I have to know. Did he drink did he drink like a pot of coffee a day? I bet he did.
Yes. Yeah. No, Frenchy was a huge caffeine fiend, huge sugar fiend. We used to joke with Belle that he drank coffee as an excuse to consume sugar. But yeah, no, he was pretty much mainlining caffeine in the morning.
Coffee with a bunch of sugar? Okay, that makes so much sense with Frenchy's personality. That's beautiful. Madam, please, anything else that we can talk about here before we wrap it up? This hour absolutely flew by. You were an amazing guest. Of course, the website, check it out, everybody. You can find everything Frenchy Cannoli at FrenchyCannoli.com, and then the documentary, FrenchyDreamsOfHashish.com. Any parting words?
So the only other little tiny thing that I would say is that if you would like to receive an email on April 29th with the link to the Vimeo page where the film will be available, just visit that www.FrenchyDreamsOfHashish.com and then put a /streaming, And that'll just put your name on the email list. And on the day of the event, I'll send you out an email with the link to make it easy for you to find the film.
Absolutely
And
wonderful.
then otherwise, I hope that you'll join the live stream. So we're going to be streaming at 8:30 in those 3 time zones. And it will be on Frenchy's YouTube page, on our Lost Art Facebook page, on Frenchy's Instagram, and on his LinkedIn account. So you don't have to sign up for a new app or a new account. Most people have one of those, are on one of those platforms. And so cool. Yeah, 8:30, 3 times on that day, we'll be joining some of our friends worldwide to talk about the film, pass the hookah around virtually, and just spend a little community time together.
I will be there. One more time, thank you so much, madam. This was a lovely interview, and it's really cool of you to do this and to be so candid and open and awesome. So thank you for everything.
Thank you very much for making the time for me.
Of course, anytime. And everybody, one more time, FrenchyCannoli.com, and then, of course, FrenchyDreamsOfHashish.com/streaming if you want to sign up to that email list. Thank you, everybody, so much. Appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you next time. Make sure to hit that subscribe, that follow, Spotify, whatever you're listening to. Go ahead and subscribe, follow us, and stay tuned for some awesome content. This is Madam Cannoli and Jordan River signing off. Wishing you an extraordinary day, everyone. Be safe out there and grow smarter. Bye-bye. That is our show. Thank you so much to Madam Cannoli, and thank you for tuning in today. Come and see us. We have a bunch of events coming up. Community Cup, Oklahoma City, May 7th. I've told you all about it. It's a day of education. It is stacked with speakers like Brandon Rust and OK Calix and Farmer John and myself and everybody. It's worth the drive down. Everybody, you do not need a medical card to enter. General admission, only $20. Grab those tickets at growcastpodcast.com/community cup. Now, we also have our classes Pestapalooza coming to Long Island and coming to San Diego. That is an all-day pest fest with me and Matthew Gates. Don't miss it, everybody. Don't miss it. That one's going to be huge. We're in Long Island in June, and we're in San Diego in July. I can't wait to come and see you. So stay tuned, everybody. We've got all sorts of stuff. Find all of our events at growcastpodcast.com/classes. We put everything on up there. And I want to come and smoke your homegrown with you. I'll bring some peach dosi. We can swap. And I love shaking hands with the fans and the growers, meeting you people one-on-one. It's my favorite thing. I made a pledge after the lockdown ended that I was going to do as many in-person events as I can. And now look at us. We're doing master classes. We're doing members cultivators cups, community cups. It's getting big, everybody. We're doing it every day. I will continue to work tirelessly for the Growcast audience and for the members of the Order of Cultivation. Membership is open. growcastpodcast.com/membership. All right, everyone. I'll see you next time. Stay tuned, everybody. You know what to do. Be safe out there. Do you like Growcast Podcast? Of course you do. Well, if you love this show, you're going to love A Slice of Cannabis, a show all about food and cannabis, hosted by our good friends and members, Hort and the Rugged Gent. What's up, Rugged?
Hey everyone, Rugged Gent here. If you're all about cooking, great cuisine, and cannabis like I am, then you've got to come subscribe to A Slice of Cannabis. We're free to listen to on Spotify or any podcast app, so come and subscribe today. Tune in to hear from world-renowned members of the cannabis industry as we explore the beautiful relationship between the food we enjoy and the cannabis we love to consume. Season 2 has just kicked off, so come check it out and catch up on old episodes with Jordan, friends of Growcast, professional chefs, and much more. A Slice of Cannabis. Find us on Spotify or your favorite podcast app, and I'll see you there.
A Slice of Cannabis, everyone. Go and subscribe now.
And the funny thing is, your game, you hardly touch the ball with your foot.